Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to a very special video where we are going over Saturday's late pick 5, where the turf meets the surf at Del Mar. Now, before we get into that, I want to make sure to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel today. We have race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, as well as horse racing news shows, and so much more. Just this week, we have previews for races in New York, California, Kentucky, and oh, by the way, a little country called Japan for the Japan Cup and Auguste Rodin's final race. So should be a lot of fun. One-stop shop for everything horse racing and handicapping. So make sure to press that like and subscribe button today. Now, as I said, we're going back out, because of course we were just out there for the Breeders' Cup. We're going back out to Del Mar, looking into this late pick 5 sequence, and few people I would trust more to do this with than my good friend Gino Buccola. Gino, thank you so much for coming on and talking about what I think is pretty fun sequence with some nice competitive fields throughout.
Yeah, good time of the year right now, too. There's been some good racing. New York, Churchill's had some good action, and we'll be taking a look at Del Mar in the late pick 5 sequence this weekend. I actually thought the stakes race, the feature, the native diver, a bit interesting because, as the case with a lot of these major races, Bob Baffert's going to have a strong hand, but I thought it was a little bit tricky and not just very straightforward there. So Looking forward to diving into the sequence with you, Matty.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously here on the East Coast, we know about the other Chad. Yep. Out in California, you know about the other Bob. And so it's never quite as easy as it might first appear on the page. But we'll get to that one. But let's dive into a 10-horse starter allowance to kick things off. And this is going to be for 3-year-olds and up. And this is going 5 furlongs on the turf. And this is race 5 with post time being 5:28 p.m. Eastern time. And so, Gino, this is a field where pretty tepid favorite in terms of the number 8 Lonesome Stew at 3-1. You have a couple of other horses, Rexford for Phil D'Amato, obviously always formidable out on the West Coast. Peter Miller has got a pair of nice horses and is kind of always had a good reputation, I think, in turf sprint divisions in particular. So interested in what your thoughts are with this, kind of how deep you're thinking about going in this one, and kind of where you ultimately landed maybe as a top pick or horses you're including on that A line of your ticket.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I think the horses that are in kind of the second tier of prices are very interesting. Lonesome Stew makes a whole lot of sense. The two that I kind of gravitated towards first were probably the 5 Without Borders and the 7 Rexford. Those two will probably be in that same sort of range. Without Borders is a horse, when you go through the overall form, in particular the last 3, the races make a lot of sense to me. I really like them. Found a mile just a little bit too far last time out. Now you get the cutback. This is a horse who's actually defeated Kid Azteca, actually outfinished a horse named Phosphorescence, who was in front of Bee Catcher, has really good form lines running through this race, has some tactical speed, but as we've seen, he can sit and pounce. He's proven at Del Mar, and he's proven going the 5 furlong turf course, which some of these are maybe a little bit better going 6 furlongs or maybe 5.5 furlongs. So to me, the 5 Without Borders, who will be one of those horses kind of vying for favoritism. He checks a lot of boxes. I think the same for the number 7 Rexford, checks a lot of those boxes for me with the proven 5 furlong turf form here at Del Mar, the little bit of positional speed, but can also pass some horses.
Yeah, I think both make a lot of sense as well. Both are going to be included on my ticket for sure. And it's interesting. This is a race where you would imagine the speed is going to come from the inside, in particular the number 1 Disobey, who's a pretty fast horse, but also is getting the blinkers put on from that inside rail. A lot of intentionality there for that long shot. And then Light Ranching Kid, also one with really good speed as well. So to your point, Without Borders kind of has shown that ability to sit just a little bit and be able to pounce late, particularly that race 2 back at roughly the same level in terms of being a $50,000 starter allowance. The success at Del Mar, notable in this spot. Yeah, Lonesome Stew is a horse that I will always probably play against, which is a horse that's 3-1 on the morning line. And if this race was run in the dirt, I would probably like this horse a lot more. And I would sit there and maybe single this horse. But the lone turf effort was not great. Admittedly, maybe some excuses there, but still, now that we're running on the turf, I don't know what to expect. I don't know if there's going to be that 1-to-1 correlation in terms of those speed figures from dirt to turf. And I think that's always the calculation that we have to play, especially, and we're dealing with it right now in New York because we're off the turf now for the year. So we're seeing a lot of horses transitioning from turf to dirt and going, okay, like, is that form going to really stand up when they try the new surface? And I think there's enough questions that at 3-1, I'm willing to try to look past this one. And so I think, Without Borders makes a lot of sense. Rexford certainly makes a lot of sense. One horse that I will probably be using more on my vertical exotics is going to be the number 4 B Catcher, a horse that always runs really honest at 8-1 for Doug O'Neill, 9 second place finishes. So kind of does have that reputation of coming up a little bit short. Would be hard to include this one on my tickets in terms of the late pick 5. But again, if you're playing this race vertically, that's a horse that you might be able to think about including to add a little bit of value.
Yeah, and I was not exactly sure what to do with the 3 Kid Azteca, who I think for people who are like trip players, if you watch a lot of replays, you probably played this horse a few times because he's had some trouble trips or some that you wanted to give him another shot for. He's over his last 13. I will say he does add the blinkers now, which is a little bit interesting for a horse like him with his kind of tendencies to be close but not put it all together. Sometimes just a little equipment change like that could help. And he actually did break his maiden in the blinks. So one of his 2 victories in his career came while wearing blinkers. So if he's a horse who you kind of look at and you're like, he doesn't win a whole lot, at least they're trying something different here, where you can make a case for there being a different result, and it's not just the actual definition of insanity, right? When you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And so at least there's a little bit of a change here that we can see something different. But I couldn't get too many bust out long shots in here. I thought it was a challenging race. I'll probably try to key in on maybe 2 of those horses when I'm building my pick 5 ticket, not go that deep in a race where many may probably go 4 or 5 deep and spread around. I'll see if I can key in on maybe those 2 and one other that I liked.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And I think that Kid Azteca is that's a great point about the blinkers, because that is a horse that just drives me nuts in these sorts of spots, because you go, listen, to your point, I bet on this horse before. I can't trust this horse. And then they go and do something and totally redeem themselves. And they make the one change where like, well, now the horse is adding blinkers. And now I feel like that might be what puts the horse over the top. But am I really going to try to go back as well one more time?
I know. And not the biggest cry. It is. And that's what you start hemming and hawing with yourself as a horse player. So, and then a lot of that comes down to when you're building your ticket and the structure and what happens in the next few races, right? You come back and say, okay, he's not going to be a short price horse. So I like a couple other prices in the sequence. I'll make sure I don't let him beat me. That's not something you want to do with really short prices, but a horse that'll be like 4-1-ish in that range. It's you're a little more okay with being defensive with horses like that versus the really short price defensive horses.
Exactly. This is not a 6-5 defensive B sort of a thing. No, that's for our good friend Mark Capitan to do that, and so we'll throw Mark under the bus there. I know he'll appreciate that. But no, I think we see this race much the same way. Going to try to get around the favorite, catch kind of those middle prices, like you said, and move on to the next. Survive and advance, as the great Jim Valvano said. So let's advance to the very next race, which is a $50,000 maiden claimer for 3-year-old and up. California bred fillies and mares going 5.5 furlongs on the dirt, a little bit of a shorter field. You do have a bit more of a kind of heavy favorite, I'll say, but with 9-5 Maya Kama for Jeff Mullins, but you also have Uptown Preacher at 5-2 for Carla Gaines, Pondicherry for Doug O'Neill at 3-1. So you do have a couple of horses vying for that favoritism. A short field, typically knowing that we have a couple of bigger fields coming up in the 2 of the next 3 legs, you probably don't want to go too deep here, but I'm interested. Did you see a difference between maybe those top 3 choices, or are you trying to catch a little bit more of a price in this leg?
I think I like one of them, and then probably one more that I will include. The 2 Pondicherry is the one that I think I'm the most interested in to start with, because that debut race was very good. First off, it was an open maiden 50, and a lot of these are coming out of Calbred maiden 50. So just right off the bat, faced tougher company, and wasn't immediately first step out of the gate fast, but then pushed right up to battle for the lead. They were aggressive with this horse. And at the top of the lane, she was battling with one other horse. she kept going and she still had the lead. That horse ended up finishing last in the race and just completely backed up. So just looking at the way that those two horses finished, now claimed and is going to go into the Doug O'Neill barn for the first time. Over the last 5 years, so a full 5-year sample, we're talking 161 horses. Doug O'Neill is 20% first start off the claim. That's a huge sample size to be winning 1 out of every 5. And in just knowing their barn, Matt, they've always been a barn that's done this really well, where they would claim horses that they thought were good maiden claiming horses that were probably maybe a little bit better. Maybe there was a physical issue. Like these horses were good in the mornings. They knew them, like high upside horses, right? Yeah. Playing kind of money ball, like that sort of thing. Like, hey, we'll claim a horse like this. We'll take a swing on some of these horses. And a few of them end up being stakes horses, and you get Lava Mans and horses like that out of them, where you you get the high upside horses. But in particular with maidens, with just like that, I was very impressed with the race from Pondicherry. I think there's good speed there, probably one of the quicker. And then this barn is very, very good first start off the claim. So to me, just a lot of positives. I thought of the 3 horses that we were talking about, I thought she might be the one with the most upside, honestly, of those 3, of like Uptown Preacher, Pondicherry, and Mayakama, who are lightly raced. So I liked her, Maddie, and I wanted to give a little nod to the outside runner too, the first time starter, Diva Cat, who's 5-1. She goes out for Mark Latt, whose barn is 21 for 139 over the last 5 years with first time starters. That's a $2.24 ROI if you're just blindly betting all of the first time starters. Just one with a 7-1 shot last week to a first time starter. So, the barn is very capable. This particular filly is a half to a horse named Spectator, who won the debut, won the first 2 starts, including the grade 2 Sorrento. Then she was 3rd in the Del Mar debutante. She was off the rest of her 2-year-old season. She came back at age 3. She won a non-winners of 2, and then she was 2nd in the Santa Anita Oaks. So that was a nice horse. She didn't do a whole lot wrong to start her career. She ran behind Midnight Bisou. She was multiple grade 1 placed. There's also a horse that's half to a horse named Policy, who won the debut, going 5.5 on the dirt at Del Mar, was stakes placed. I just think there's kind of sneaky pedigree for a barn that's been really good first time out. So I'll probably try to get a lot built around 2 and 7, I think, in here, where a lot of money will go on the 1 and the 5, and I respect them, but I like the 2 the most. And I think we might be able to get some sneaky value with Diva Cat in here also.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that I'm always worried about the number 1 hole in these 5.5 furlong sprints, particularly at this level. So that's always going to be a concern for me for a horse like Uptown Preacher. Mayakama, yeah, you're right. I mean, certainly finished 2nd last time out. Jeff Mullins, we should say, has started off this Del Mar meet pretty slow, 0 for 14 at this point. So maybe a barn that's just not quite firing on full cylinders yet. And Pondicherry, to your point, drilling down even more into that off the claim. Over the last 5 years, it's not as big of a sample size. You look at Doug O'Neill, first off the claim in maiden claimers, 28% winning with a 5 for 18 record.
It's a plan, in knowing them. And it's like, when it's just like anything, different coaching staffs of different sports, right? Not every staff does things the same way. They all have different strategies. They run different offenses. They run different schemes. That's how I look at it with these barns and these operations, right? They go in with a plan. They have sharp people in their operation looking at these maiden claiming races, looking for horses to go out and to claim out of them, because they feel like that's where they could get some advantage. They can get some of these lightly raced horses, make 1 or 2 changes. Maybe they can see something that not everybody else is seeing, and that's how they can gain an advantage. And in knowing them and knowing those are the plans and seeing the numbers, how well they are, it's just something to take a note on for any of you watching these videos. When you see this barn, John Sadler was another one in California that did this quite often. When they claim horses out of maiden claiming races, just take note, because they are really sharp in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, sometimes you'll see trainers do that, and it's not a typical move. They don't go to it a lot, but when they do, that they really saw something they liked to try to get a horse out of those areas and out of those races. Like you, Diva Cat was the other horse that I looked at. I mean, listen, we've done shows together for years, Gino. We share a like mind in many ways. But you mentioned the damn side pedigree for first out success. The fact that Glatt, in particular, this is something else to pay attention to. It's one thing to see a horse that has great first out pedigree. It's another thing to see a horse with great first out pedigree and a trainer who has a reputation for succeeding first time out as well. The opposite side of that is a trainer I love. We both love Shug McGahee. Shug can have an $8 million horse. That sucker's not winning in debut. I'll tell you that right now.
Nope.
I mean, just is allergic to getting horses ready off the bench and first time out. So Glatt, though, quite the opposite. He's off to a very hot start at Del Mar, 35% during the early stages of this meet. And this is someone who has success at this maiden claiming level, debuting horses at maiden claiming, debuting horses in general. So a lot of things to like there for a horse that's 5-1 and may get a little overlooked simply because people, I think, are going to focus in on Mayakama and a horse like Uptown Preacher because the speed figures maybe are a little bit more attractive. And people a lot of times at this level, and I don't blame them for this angle, will go with a horse that has a race under the belt.
Absolutely.
Already has a little bit of experience.
Yep. And I don't really have many. I prefer, I think, Uptown Preacher, I guess, of Mayakama, maybe just because of that factor, the upside. And maybe you can take another step forward for Carla Gaines, who's generally much better with horses making their second start. I think 17% over the last 5 years with horses making their second start. 2 of the last 4, 3 of the last 8 have won. So always a bar that's a little bit better with experience, but I don't know if that filly is just quite as quick as the one right next door to her. And that could just sort of put her in a tough position where she's in a little bit of that chase mode that you were describing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's always the concern is if you're on the inside rail, for me, you better have elite early speed just because that way I know you can get out of the gate and stay out of trouble. But if you're drawing and there's a horse to your outside or a 2 posts outside that's got better speed, I know exactly what's going to happen, which is you're going to break just a millisecond slow and somebody's going to cross in front of you. And suddenly the whole complexion of the race changes. And that horse doesn't end up getting the trip that you think the horse maybe wants to get from that inside rail. So I think, we see this one pretty similarly, but I think you can go a little skinnier, maybe not a single skinny, but a little skinnier at least in this leg. Now let's head to the middle leg of this pick 5 sequence, which is a $20,000 optional claimer, again for Calbreds, 3-year-olds and up. And we're going 5 furlongs on the turf. We have a 10-horse field. And again, kind of a, from a morning line standpoint, a little bit of a 2-horse race between the number 3 Devil Be Me, I should say, for Steve Knapp, and Double Jab for Andy Mathis. Double Jab is a piece of advice I would have given Mike Tyson last week. Maybe you want to double up on those jabs.
I know.
That usually is helpful, but easier said than done because as the great Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So listen, this race, 5 furlong turf sprints, I usually like going with chaos and I usually like going against favorites. So I imagine you and I are probably going to be at least sniffing around some of these same horses. Do you have any big prices you like in this leg?
Yeah, a couple to the outside that I think are the fun prices. I do think that Double Jab is the safest bet in this race of the horses because another situation where if you're looking at the horses who are proven at 5, you have a lot of concerns about some of these horses getting the flat 5 furlongs. I really don't have that concern with Double Jab at all. No, shouldn't have any problem there. Actually, probably just went a little too far going 6.5 last time out. It was a really tough DQ too for Double Jab last time. It's like one of those where Double Jab was best, but impacted the horse who ran like 4th or 3rd, and so had to get placed behind that one. It was just a real bummer if you back Double Jab. The ones though that I think are kind of the fun pick 4, pick 5 horses to include would be 7, 8, and 9. I'd be okay with any 3 of them as like a price horse to include on tickets in here. The 7 Refocus or the 7 Supernal is not a horse who's necessarily been a win machine as of late, but you got to do a little bit of the, the diving. The form before switching into the D'Amato barn was very, very good at Golden Gate and at Pleasanton. And then most recently, this horse had legitimate trouble on October the 27th. Prior to that, it had a string of 3 solid races going 5 furlongs. Just not a lot of early speed in those races, but I think fits pretty well at 5-1. Have no problem throwing that one in. refocus, deep closer, not one of the more likely winners, right? This isn't a horse who wins often because of that running style, but based on class and trip, this is a horse who could be competitive enough with the right type of trip. So if you're spreading out and using a couple in here, this would be the type of horse who I would throw in a few price horses. We've seen the horse get 5 furlongs. Same thing for Capital Outlay. Totally opposite end of the spectrum, though. Capital Outlay is all speed. This horse cannot go 6 furlongs. Anything over 5 furlongs is just too far for Capital Outlay. I don't love the outside draw, but has enough speed to where he shouldn't have to be really, really wide, and he can be close up throughout. And I would not be shocked at all to see that horse run really well. So I kind of looked at Double Jab as the horse to beat. And I had 3, I thought, really intriguing kind of price horses or horses that might offer a little more value that I could include in some way, shapes, or form here.
Yeah, I definitely like Double Jab the most out of the kind of 2 shorter priced horses. And I say that because of the same situation we had in the first race of this sequence, where Double Be Me has only run once on the turf and it was a 4th place finish. Otherwise, has been on the dirt. So again, I'm willing to kind of try to beat that horse in these spots just because he's not.
And it was going long too, Matt. Like and not meaning to cut you off, and like
no.
The problem when I watch Devil Be Me, who I really respect as a horse, I think a lot of his what's positive for him is he's able to just kind of cruise going a little bit longer. He has this sort of nice cruising speed where he just sort of goes out there, he runs his race. When you shorten horses like that up a little bit, it's not always as easy or as simple as you might think. Oh, they're just going to shorten up. They're going to turn back. They're going to be fitter. When they have to run a little bit faster and they're not used to that tempo, then it might just be a totally different ball game for them. So I'm with you in just thinking, I feel better about the trip Double Jab will get here if I was looking for one of those shorter prices to kind of grab onto versus Devil Be Me. That I would be probably more okay taking a swing against him here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to your point, we saw that a little bit during the Breeders' Cup weekend with a horse like Next.
Exactly.
Great cruising speed at 1.5 miles. He's elite. You cut him back just a little bit to 1.25 miles. Suddenly the pace scenario is completely different. He's not comfortable. He ends up finishing last. And I will say there are very few distances, Gino, where you do a cutback to 5 furlongs, right? I mean, like to your point about like Capital Outlay, like can't get 6. So you got to cut the horse back to 5. Makes sense. And there's all sorts of, we talk about, the downhill 6.5, you go from 1 mile to 6.5, things like that. Very rarely do you go from 1 mile to 5 furlongs and you go, this is all going to work out just fine. A lot of times it is a completely different level of speed that you're dealing with and just completely different dynamics. And again, it just is a totally different dynamic, which leads to horses not performing as well. Even if you go, well, they tired at 1 mile, maybe they can get 5 furlongs. Like that's not the way it works. Like it's going to be a completely different setup now for that horse. I really did hone in on Capital Outlay. That was the one I really liked at 12-1 quite a bit, just because, like Lee said, of the speed. Going 5 furlongs, I generally like horses that are going to be close up there and that are going to be close to the pace and are going to put themselves in a position to potentially be able to get the job done. It's hard sometimes for me to rely on those deeper closers in these turf sprints just because so many things have to go right. They have to get the right trip. They have, traffic issues that they have to potentially contend with, all sorts of other things. Capital Outlay, I know where that horse is going to be. It's going to be up on the front end, sitting first, second, or third. And like you said, it helps actually that the 7 and 8 are both a little bit slower because
won't have to be as wide.
Exactly. It's going to be able to cross over at least a few of those horses and save some ground going into that far turn. So I will say another horse that I just want to mention that we didn't really get to is Peter Urton's horse, Uncle John, at 8-1. This horse has a little bit of speed. Again, this is one kind of cutting back a little bit from 6.5 last time out, now going back to 5. I wonder where this one finds itself in the early pace with that inside post position. Probably does feel the need to really go. Kazushi's probably going to want to be pretty aggressive with this horse. But coming out of, and this is always an interesting equation, right? Open company claiming 25. Now we're going into state bred optional claiming 20. And so the level of competition, sometimes you go, well, the horse is coming, going up from claiming to optional claiming, but you're also going from open company to state bred.
It's kind of lateral.
Exactly. More of a lateral move, I think. And I thought at 8-1 could be an interesting horse. Again, depending on ticket construction, how deep you are, and some other legs. I thought this is another one at a little bit of a price that could be interesting. The other one I mentioned, Geezer, was a horse that I liked, but obviously I think was going to want one off the bench. And I'd rather kind of sit this one out and watch how this horse runs first time off the bench rather than play this one in my tickets. But should be a fun race. Those 5 furlong sprints always are. Well, let's head to the feature race of the sequence, which is the Grade 3 Native Diver. It's only a 6-horse field, but Gino, you mentioned this earlier. I think it's a really intriguing race.
Yeah.
Your morning line favorite is Ultra Power for Bob Baffert. You have a horse like Tarantino that has suddenly remembered how to win. The horse went 3.5 years without winning and then goes to Peter Urton's barn and, has kind of and Urton, I don't know if he's done anything differently, but the horse is being ridden differently and is now suddenly up on the front end and getting things done up front, which is where he always had success. If you go back to his early races that he did win, it was when he was kind of sitting mid-pack and further back that he had issues. You have Mixto, who's coming off the Breeders' Cup Classic.
He's actually the only graded stakes winner in the field, too. He's a great. There's two. The Salesman has that really small Grade 2 win, but Mixto is the only Grade 1 winner, and I think so. He's the only Grade 1 winner, and the only other graded stakes winner was Salesman, who's kind of not in really form right now. I kind of when I was going through this race, kind of process of elimination, I sort of dismissed Salesman pretty early on, and that could be, obviously for a barn like Mandela, but I couldn't get him into this race.
I could not.
Any of the other 5, you can absolutely get to.
You 100% can. I could not agree more. You can absolutely get to all those. Miramati is really interesting, in my opinion, on the inside. That's a horse that finally broke his maiden last time out. And he broke his maiden when they finally stretched him out. And he was able to go long, and he was able to get clear. And he's breaking on the inside. Martin Garcia, I had to look this up. This is wild. Over the last 5 years, is winning 58% of the time when he rides for Bob Baffert. Not a bad number. He's a serious horse because I think he's the speed of the speed. And I think the 2 Bafferts could potentially go into the first turn, sitting first and second. And we've seen this in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile where Citizen Bull, that race was over going into the first turn, just got onto the lead and never looked back.
I had 2 real highlights of my Breeders' Cup weekend a few weekends back. The first of them, seeing Mr. Matthew DeSantis in person. The second of them was Friday night. I had dinner and I had pizza with Mr. Frank Miramati himself. I believe Jennifer, who does some sponsorship stuff for NYRA, our friend Shiva, we sat down. We had a really fun time. We had dinner and we were telling stories. I used to work with Frank. Honestly, it's like sometimes when Frank and I are sitting down, I feel like I'm like in a comedy act. Like we go back and forth and we kind of are like one up it's such a great energy. He is one of my favorite people in the entire world. I love him so much. And I had to give the main man a call earlier today because I told him I was doing this show with you. I said, we're talking about Miramati. So give me some of the, give me some of the insight. And he started laughing. He said, I always love it when the Baffert's running against another really good Baffert right there, right? like Ultra Power right next door. But we talked about how the dam of this horse was actually good going long, right? More Chocolate. She was a 3-time winner. She was Miramati's mom. She won going a mile and a 16th, a mile and an 8th, and a mile and a 16th. She was a Grade 2 winner and multiple Grade 1 placed. So for a horse who, I will be very honest, and I played against Miramati repeatedly. He was a money burner over and over and over again. But like what we were just saying, they made an adjustment. Something was different. They went longer and then boom, this horse was ridden really aggressively going longer. And when you look back and go, okay, why did that happen? Why was that? Okay. Well, they got really aggressive with the horse whose pedigree says that he's probably going to be even better going longer. And I don't think the Baffert runner right next door wants to push him either. Like, I don't think that's really the trick
I don't think
Ultra Power wants. I think he wants to sit more and kind of sit back and grind. And when you start going through this field, you've got Mixto. It's not as fast as Miramati.
Nope.
It really comes down to now what's happening between Miramati and Tarantino. Like, that's really how this race shapes up to me. What happens early between those two? Because if Miramati's able to hold that position down inside, he could absolutely be gone here.
I completely agree. I think he is a dangerous horse in this spot. And I'm not sure. It's hard for me, I guess, to trust Tarantino
Agree.
just because
Well,
of that rather rapid ascension from claiming 40 to optional claiming 80 to now we're in a grade 3 and we're at 3-1.
and here's my question to you. Even if we trust that Tarantino is now a better horse and we like for whatever reason, Peter Urton's figured something a little bit out. They've improved him a little bit. They're riding him more aggressively. That's better.
Yeah.
Is he going to actually benefit in this race with those tactics? Because let's say that happens, he goes really fast and him and Miramati battle. That doesn't benefit him any. I don't think he's going to be the one that would take advantage of. Like, I just feel like he's going to have to either do the dirty work, and I don't know if he's going to get in front of Miramati. So to me, I just can't picture him being loose on the front end or battling it out with Miramati and then holding off Ultra Power or Mixto or one of the closers who could actually be taking advantage and getting the benefit there. So I completely agree with where you're going. I respect what they've done with Tarantino. I played him a lot of times. He had some tough misses over the couple years where he wasn't winning, but I can't get there myself with him because I think he's either going to be the horse that has to do the dirty work and get softened up, or just isn't quite around late when maybe Skinner, Ultra Power, Mixto might be a little better at the mile and an eighth.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, he's a horse I'm just going to have a hard time including on my tickets. Mixto is another one. Listen, I know he came back with that really strong work leading up to this race, something you and I, though, have talked about over the years. Man, I don't like betting horses coming out of the Breeders' Cup because
that was the plan. That was the game plan. Exactly. That was everything for them. And he won a really soft renewal of the Pacific Classic. Wasn't very strong. Now he did beat Full Serrano, who came back to win the dirt mile. So that's something. But when we're talking about horses with upside, with higher ceiling, with just the way this race shapes up, I much prefer Ultra Power as just being the better horse or the best horse, getting a little more distance to work with. If I was looking for the other value in here, it would be for me Skinner, in just a horse who you absolutely just know who he is. This is a horse who is a late runner. He got a lot of buzz at the end of his 2-year-old season and into 3-year-old season because he has the profile and the template of the horses that we as the gamblers get excited for in those Triple Crown races. The ones that come running late and that you can always go, with a little more distance, they're going to be awesome.
More distance. Exactly.
And you know what? He doesn't have a bunch of bad races. He just had issues, physical issues that caused him to miss a bunch of time along the way. And you can absolutely map it out and go, this horse had a full year off, basically. Yeah. And he just came back sprinting. He lost to a horse named Red Flag, who's won 3 in a row. That's just a grade 3 sprinter. And now he's going to stretch out. That was just to get the race under him. I don't think he's good. It would probably be tough in this small field and he'd need things to go well. But I'd probably prefer him at twice the price than Mixto if I was looking for a horse to play.
100%. I would rather play Skinner at 5-1 than Mixto at 5-2.
Yep.
And Skinner's, he's a type of horse that's going to be hard for me to include on a pick 5 ticket because of that late running style, because of the track profile, because of the likely pace scenario that we just laid out. But he's one that, man, if I'm putting together an exacta, I mean, he's going to be in it because I just know what he's going to do every single time, and you're getting a little bit of value there. I just think obviously this will be interesting. We'll see if there is any scratches in this race. I mean, that would obviously potentially really change the complexion in such a short field. If there's just even one scratch, that could really change the way you might want to try to approach playing this race. But for me, I think Miramati, I don't know, really interesting at 6-1. I could see this being another Bob sort of a situation where Ultra Power is trying to grind away. And that's so many times the profile of Baffert horses. They either are great early speed or they're grinders. And that's kind of you see the two sides of the coin here with Miramati now kind of having that great early speed and Ultra Power being that one more in the country grammar ilk of just kind of a grinder that kind of gets the job done. The longer you go, the mile and an eighth would seem to be the one. So Going to be a fun race for sure. Plenty of options depending on your opinions on this race. But let's close it out with a maiden special weight, $54,000 maiden special weight for 3-year-olds and up, going a mile on the turf. And in this one, you do have the number 2 Mark Glatt, Mysterious Husband, as your 5-2 morning line favorite. You also have Dirago for Robert B. Hess Jr. at 3-1 as your second choice on the outside. You have a horse Over the Ocean, 4-1 for Jonathan Thomas, who's your third choice. But then you have a lot of, pretty big prices in this race too. Gino, I know our mutual friend Chase Sessions always assumes that there's going to be complete chaos in the last leg of every single sequence. Do you see chaos here? Do you see a little bit of both, or what?
I hope so. I have a strong opinion on one horse that I like that I definitely want to mention. As
let's go for it.
When we do shows like this, I love watching other people do pick 4 and pick 5 analysis, is because the things that I'm looking for are not necessarily how everybody is going to put a pick 5 ticket together. Sometimes that can be super helpful. I like to see who horses people may single or where they shorten up sometimes, but I'm always looking for horses that are like 6 to 15-1 that aren't on my radar. Maybe a horse that I missed. Why did I miss this horse? Can you show me something that maybe I missed? Because those are horses I'm going to throw into my pick 4 or pick 5, right? Everybody can add a horse or two like that for an extra $5 or $8 or however much your ticket is. You're not going to necessarily maybe change everything around it. But that's, I think, the way that shows like this can be really helpful to people. And that's the way that I try to help people, because that's the way that I play. And hopefully in this race, I think the number 4 Malibu Rocks is one of those horses. When you go through this horse's overall form, the first 2 races were on the dirt. They were very good. This horse debuted in a strong race. It was on opening day at Santa Anita last year. And then in the second start, took a nice step forward, improved, showed speed that day, stretched out from 6 furlongs to a mile, earned an 84 Beyer speed figure in finishing second. It's a really good effort. Problem was, that was back in January, so was off from January to August. Ton of time off, shows back up, and the only race that he's raced on the grass was in that race off the long layoff in August. It was a weird race, and it was sneaky good. This horse was actually couldn't get towards the lead, but wanted to. There were just like 6 horses that all had a good start. And it was just got to make a decision. Do I want to go and battle with these other 4 horses, or, hey, let's just make the decision early that we're going to take back a little bit? And he is faster than he may look on paper, just coming off of those last 2 races. He really is. In that grass race, he gets caught in the 2 path. He's about 3 lengths off. He's 6th. He's got nowhere to go. And he tries to move in between horses. And then I'm watching him like, oh, he's done. And then all of a sudden, late in the race, he's still trying. Like if you're watching him and you bet him, you completely thought he was going to back up and be last. And then you're looking down going, wow, this horse is still trying. And he's still trying. Yeah. And then you see the horses who were in front of him that day. Joyrider, who was also beating Spearfish right next door. You see Spycatcher, who came back to win next time out. Middleburg, who came back to win next time out, defeating Mysterious Husband, who's the favorite in here. You look at the form, that all makes sense. Malibu Rocks, that was on the grass. That was August 31st. After that race, what happens in his next start? He runs into Miramati when Miramati freaked.
Right.
And he's down towards the inside. He has a good start, but Miramati just goes on with it. And this horse kind of has to back up. Again, he can't really use some of that speed that he has. It's a little bit hidden because he ran into a really, really nice horse who freaked that day. So he's now going to go as a first-time gelding. Third start off the long layoff. He gets back to the grass where he ran sneaky. I think this horse is going to be on the lead or really close to the front end in here. I think they're going to get very aggressive with him. And I think he's going to be one of those horses that outruns his odds at a really fair price. Like Turning for Home, if he's a length clear, you're going to hear me yelling and screaming here in Southern California. These are the fun horses to have, if you're closing out. So, throw this one into some of your late pick 4s or pick 5s. He could give you a little run for your money. And that form overall is muddled up. I think it's very good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the muddled up form. And I think that he's one that is going to be a really good find to include on some of these tickets. The other one that I'll mention is who's not quite as big of a price, but I do think the number 6 English Icon, makes some sense here. And I think that this is a horse that ran pretty well in that debut race that you had mentioned with Spycatcher, Middleburg, and Joyrider. And, ran fifth that day, made a little bit of a run past some horses. And then they did the thing we just kind of talked about. They went from a mile to 6 furlongs. And it was like, that maybe was a little too fast for this horse. Didn't really like that pace. Just kind of like, okay, that was, going 44 and change was not what that horse wanted to do. And now we're going back out to a mile. I think the pace scenario just plays out a little bit better. This horse can sit more of a mid-pack trip, maybe even a little bit more of a tracking trip in this particular spot. 6-1 for Mark Glatt, a trainer we already talked about, pretty successful at this level. We're getting blinkers taken off. And so I think this one could sit a little bit more of an interesting trip than you might expect. And again, kind of the English Channel pedigree up top. I'm always going to be attracted to that going long on the turf. So I think that this is one at 6-1. Again, kind of an interesting possibility there. You mentioned Spearfish at 15-1.
The one's a major player for me too. Probably Over the Ocean. I'll use a lot in like closing exotics. For me, a horse like Malibu Rocks, if I can get above 6, I'll probably play that horse to win. I think there's the value there. Over the Ocean to me, along with Mysterious Husband, those are two of the major measuring stick type horses. I thought the one's race at Keeneland was pretty good. Was forwardly placed, was second, was chasing a lone speed winner, kind of loomed up to challenge, but that horse just was more comfortable on the front end, kicked on. And now could be a little tighter, could be a little sharper. First time gelding, saves ground from the inside. Lots of positives there for a really good turf barn, right? That's what you think of when you think of Jonathan Thomas, this kind of thing going along on the turf.
Yeah, another one sired by Oscar Performance. And speaking of pedigrees, I do think a horse, and it's coming back from a little bit of a layoff, I'll be interested to see whether or not this horse shows any better speed with Mike Smith on board. And that's number 3, Divisible By, 8-1. This horse is a late runner. Man, if this horse just didn't give himself so much to do, it might be a little bit more interesting. It's hard to really include this horse on your late pick 5s. I get it, because this horse just kind of comes up a little bit short and hasn't really proven to be able to get all the way there yet. First time off the bench. I don't know. There's something interesting here. Like I said, you have Kitten's Joy influence up top, Giant's Causeway influence underneath. I mean, this horse should want to run for days and days and days. So a mile might not be long enough. Maybe we need to stretch him out to a mile and a half, bring him here to New York, run these turf marathons with 50-second opening half furlong. So opening half fraction. So, but I think that one at 8-1, again, maybe a horse that's a little bit more interesting. You and I have talked about it in the past. Horses coming back from a layoff sometimes will show a little bit better early speed than they have previously. So that's another one to keep in mind. Mike Smith aboard. Maybe Mike tries to get this horse out a little bit more quickly. But I mean, this one, the horse is just double digits back before, the race even barely starts. And so it's just hard to really trust that. But if you're looking for maybe one that might actually float up from that 8-1 morning line, maybe one to keep in mind. Gino, appreciate your time, man. This has been a lot of fun talking through this late pick 5 sequence together at Del Mar. You are the hardest working man I know in the business. So let the people know what you all have going on. You have great stuff going on at DRF, all sorts of places. So what do you have for the folks?
Yeah, this was actually a really fun week. If you follow my YouTube channel, That's What G Said podcast, you could check that out. I'll be posting a lot of stuff there, a lot of videos. Our buddy Barry joined me this week. We looked at the Churchill late pick 5 for Saturday, which is really good. Races 7 through 11, a couple graded stakes races in there. Previewing a lot of stuff for a daily racing forum, social media for them, a lot of videos on their YouTube channel as well. I just spoke with someone who you just recently spoke with, David Aragona. We previewed the 2 New York Sires stakes races for Saturday at Aqueduct. So if you need some help with that, I'm going to join the Sport of Kings podcast on Friday to talk about fairgrounds. So this week was kind of fun because I was at Aqueduct, I was at Del Mar, I was at Churchill, and I was at Fairgrounds. So it's all over the place this weekend. I've got prices all over. So I'm going to get winners at 4 different tracks on Saturday. How's that sound, Matty?
I love it. And we're going to overlap on 3 of the 4. Obviously, you're going to Fairgrounds. I'm going to Japan.
Nice.
We're going to go I'm going to do the Japan Cup, and I'm leaving Saturday, the rest of Saturday to you. I'm going to go into Sunday morning over there. But should be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great weekend of racing. It's so interesting, Gino. I was mentioning this on the Win Play show the other day. I know the big names aren't back yet, but I do feel like this time of year you get those second-tiered horses that are all running against each other. just makes for more competitive racing. And from a betting standpoint, a lot of opportunities, good field sizes at all of these tracks that we're talking about.
Yeah, now things are starting to take shape already, too. I think we heard plans like for a horse like Johannes, who was the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup, going to get ready to start the season next year in one of the Pegasus races. So, yeah, we'll see now where are these horses from the Breeders' Cup. Not like we talked about, maybe you don't want to play them at the end of this year, but I don't mind when I see where they're going to start their campaigns next year, right? And that's where they want to go. So, really looking forward to that. And anytime you need me here, Maddie, I love talking races with you. So let's see if we can get Miramati home so I can call and yell at the track announcer over at Saratoga.
I love it. Gino, thank you so much. And thank you all for watching this video on the Late Pick 5 at Del Mar for Saturday. For Gino Buccola, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.